Rapunzel stood barefoot on the cold stone floor, the moonlight barely reaching the tips of her impossibly long golden hair. In one hand, a silver blade, too polished, too sharp to have rusted in this forgotten tower. In the other, the final strand of innocence. When the steel sliced through the magic, the wind outside stopped. The forest held its breath, and far beyond the trees, something ancient opened its eyes. They told us the tower was a prison, that Rapunzel waited for rescue. But what if the truth was far more twisted? What if the tower wasn't keeping her in, but keeping something else out? And what if cutting her hair wasn't an escape, but a trigger? This is not the story you were told. This is the one that was buried beneath roots, wrapped in vines, and sung in whispers by the wind. The one where freedom comes at a cost, and the kingdom pays a price. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more hidden stories behind the legends you thought you knew. Like, comment, and share this video, so more people uncover the truth that was never meant to be told. Let's begin. Rapunzel had always known the tower as her world. Its walls were thick with age, veined with roots that pulsed faintly in the silence. There were no doors, only the one high window where light poured in like judgment. The Bruxa visited once a week, floating up on a windless breeze, never climbing, never speaking more than a sentence. She would bring food, check Rapunzel's hair, and vanish again into the trees below. No mirrors, no books, no clocks, only the sound of her own breath, and at night the whisper of stones shifting under moss. She had stopped asking why years ago. Questions were things that died in the air, unanswered and useless. Her hair was not normal. It grew inches overnight, thick like vines, glowing faintly in the dark. It moved sometimes, even when she was still. The Bruxa would run her fingers through it with an expression both reverent and terrified. Once, Rapunzel tried to cut a lock with a dull spoon. The spoon shattered. She didn't try again, until one day, while cleaning a cracked corner of the wall behind her bed, she found something buried under old stone, a small metal case, warm to the touch. Inside, a pair of silver scissors. They weren't rusted, despite the age of the tower. The blades gleamed, untouched by time. Rapunzel stared at them, heart pounding. Who left these here? Why weren't they locked away like everything else? She held them up to the light. They hummed faintly in her hands, a sound like breath held too long. That night, she dreamt of hands reaching through roots, eyes beneath the floor, a voice, hoarse and low, whispering, "Cut the chain." When she awoke, the scissors were still in her hand, her hair tangled around her body like a living net. She asked the Bruxa about the scissors the next day. The woman didn't speak. She simply stared at Rapunzel's hand and vanished faster than usual. No food, no words, just fear behind ancient eyes. The silence that followed was deeper than ever. For the first time, Rapunzel realized she wasn't alone in the tower. Not truly. Something was always watching, waiting. The roots beneath the floor twitched at night. The walls seemed to breathe in sync with her dreams. The tower was not just stone. It was alive. Rapunzel began hearing voices. Faint at first, like wind moving through hollow bones. Then louder. They didn't speak in language, but in feeling. Hunger, longing, grief. The forest outside pressed closer each day, vines curling around the window. The sun looked dimmer, the air heavier, and always the scissors whispered to her, not with words, but with pull, as if some deep part of her blood knew what they meant. She wasn't just trapped. She was being kept intact, preserved, because something needed her whole. The scissors fell heavier with each passing day, though their shape never changed. Rapunzel kept them hidden beneath her mattress, but their pull was constant, like a string tied to her chest. The silence of the tower began to twist into something unbearable. The roots below her feet trembled with anticipation, the vines outside scratching against stone like fingernails. The Bruxa stopped visiting. The food never came, and her hair, once a crown of light, had begun to gray at the ends, to dry and coil like dead ivy. Desperation rose inside her like floodwater. If this was her life, why was she still being kept alive? One night, as the air throbbed with the hum of unseen things. Rapunzel stood in front of the mirrorless wall and lifted the scissors. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from purpose. She didn't want rescue anymore. She wanted control. The blades moved through her hair like wind through wheat. One cut, then another. Her breath caught as the final strand fell to the floor. For a second, nothing happened. Then a deep groan echoed from beneath the tower, not stone shifting, but something ancient waking. The walls of the tower vibrated violently. Dust fell from the ceiling in long curtains. Outside, the moon blinked out like a snuff candle. The vines pulled away from the window, recoiling, but only for a moment. Then they surged forward, faster, thicker, more alive than before. The roots burst through the floorboards, slithering like snakes, wrapping around the cut strands of hair. Rapunzel backed away, terrified. The tower, once a prison, now pulsed like a heart with too much blood. The scissors lay on the floor, glowing faintly red. Voices howled in the wind outside, layered and impossible. Some screamed. Others laughed. The forest beyond the tower moved as if it had limbs, reaching, waking, remembering. Rapunzel saw images flash across the stone, villages sinking into roots, children pulled into hollow trees, queens crowned in vines. She stumbled toward the window, but the outside world had changed. The trees now stood taller than the tower itself. Their bark writhed, their branches looked like fingers, and at their center, a clearing opened, revealing an altar of bone. She realized too late, the tower had been a seal. Her hair had been the last thread holding the curse in place. The Bruxa hadn't imprisoned her. She had preserved her. Rapunzel wasn't the victim. She was the vessel, and by cutting her hair, she had released what had been buried under the forest long before kings built their castles. Her freedom had a price, and the kingdom would pay it in full. By morning, the forest had swallowed the horizon. From the tower's window, Rapunzel watched the kingdom disappear one village at a time, rooftops overtaken by thorns, streets flooded with vines. Birds no longer sang. The air was thick with spores that shimmered like ash. She screamed into the wind, but her voice dissolved into the rustling of leaves. Her tower groaned again. It was no longer stone. The roots had fused into walls. The floor pulsed with a heartbeat not her own. A part of her still wanted to believe it was punishment, but punishment requires guilt. What if it was something worse? A plan. A sudden flash blinded her. When her vision cleared, the Bruxa stood at the edge of the clearing, no longer cloaked but exposed. Her skin was cracked like bark, her eyes sunken with sorrow. She didn't climb. She walked. The roots carried her. Rapunzel expected anger, but the woman only whispered, "You were never meant to leave." She raised her hand and opened her palm. Visions surged. Ancient kings burning forests to build thrones, old gods buried under trees, and a pact, sealed by blood, that a daughter would be born to bind the curse. Rapunzel was not chosen. She was made. Memories not her own flooded her mind. Hundreds of girls before her, all failed vessels. Some too weak, some too rebellious. But she had been perfect. Her silence, her patience, her curiosity, all cultivated. The tower had not been a prison. It had been a womb. And now, with the hair severed and the magic undone, the curse reclaimed its voice. The forest was not destroying the kingdom in rage. It was reclaiming what was stolen. Every tree that fell to a king's blade now stood again, twisted and towering, thirsty for flesh and memory. In the ruins of the nearest village, the ground split open. Roots dragged monuments into the earth. People ran, but the vines moved faster than thought. Palaces became gardens of bone. And at the center of it all, the altar glowed, not with fire, but with hair. Rapunzel's hair. It had wrapped itself around the sacred stones like veins around a heart. She understood now. Her freedom had fertilized the awakening. The world had waited for her act, and the forest remembered. She turned from a window, breathless, eyes burning. The Bruxa looked older now, shrinking. "I tried to stop it," she whispered, "but the roots were always stronger than my will." Rapunzel stepped forward. She no longer felt fear, only inevitability. The tower didn't need her anymore. The curse was loose. But something deep inside told her her role was not over. The vines had released her, but they had not let her go. She was still bound, not to the tower, but to the forest itself. Rapunzel walked through the forest that had once been a kingdom. The ground pulsed with breath. Flowers bloomed from the ruins of homes, each petal tinged with sorrow. Statues of past rulers had become feeding posts for moss and vines. No screams remained, only whispers. The air vibrated with memories, like the forest was speaking in sighs. She didn't walk as a refugee or a victim. The forest let her pass, parting for her feet like waves for a prophet. And still, her severed hair continued to grow behind her, tangled in roots, connected her body to the land like an umbilical cord that had never been cut. The altar in the heart of the woods glowed brighter now, humming with energy. Her hair encircled it completely, no longer golden but dark like soil soaked in blood. Rapunzel stepped into the clearing, where the trees bent inward, as if bowing. The Bruxa waited one last time, her body almost dust. "You were the last," she said, kneeling. "Now it begins again." Rapunzel wanted to protest, but she couldn't. The forest was not listening to words. It listened to intention, and hers had been clear: freedom, even if it meant collapse, even if it meant becoming something else. The vines rose around her like a crown, her feet rooted to the earth, her breath slowed to match the pulse of the forest. And in that stillness, she saw them. The past lives, the failed vessels, the mothers who had wept, the daughters who had been silenced. All of them now watched her from within the bark, their faces etched in knots and hollows. But none spoke. They didn't need to. Rapunzel was no longer one of many. She was the seed that grew. The tower hadn't ended her. It had transformed her. As the sun vanished for the last time behind twisted canopies, the tower reappeared, not as stone, but as a spiraling tree carved by nature itself. Its bark bore the marks of her old room, the same window high above. She entered again, climbing roots like stairs. The inside pulsed with warmth and memory. She sat where her bed once was, and the vines wrapped gently around her wrists, not as chains, but as veins. The cycle would continue, yes, but not as before. Now the forest had a voice, and she was its echo. Outside, the land was still. A kingdom gone, but not lost, transformed. Those who would wander into the woods centuries later would find no signs of castles, only the towering trees and the occasional shimmer of golden thread between the leaves. They'd hear stories of a girl who once lived above the trees, and of the moment she set the world in motion with a single cut. But none would guess the truth, that she never left, that she was still watching, that the forest had eyes. And so, the tale of Rapunzel was never about escape. It was about transformation, about how one act of rebellion, one desperate cut, could unravel centuries of silence and awaken the roots of something older than kings. The girl in the tower was never a prisoner. She was a spark, the key, and in the end, the forest didn't devour the kingdom out of cruelty. It took back what had always belonged to it. Rapunzel didn't vanish. She became legend, not as a girl who waited for rescue, but as the force that changed the world. Those who listen closely in the deepest parts of the forest might still hear the rustle of hair brushing across the earth, or see a flicker of gold vanish behind a tree. They'll wonder if it's the wind, or if the forest is remembering again. If this story haunted you like it did us, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What if other stories you know were never about what they seemed? And if you want to support this channel and unlock exclusive stories, consider becoming a member today. More haunting truths are on the way, and one might just change everything you thought you knew.